You're listening to Trucking Tomorrow, your go-to podcast for exploring and understanding the future of trucking from a carrier's perspective. In each episode, we sit down with industry veterans to discuss what it takes to grow your trucking company in today's world. So let's hit the road with Trucking Tomorrow. Here's your host, Brian Jones.
Welcome to Trucking Tomorrow. I'm your host, Brian Jones. I'm joined today by Solomiya Tomkiv, who is the co-founder of WireBee, also grew up in the trucking world in her family's trucking business, Nika's Freight, wears multiple hats right now. Really awesome story here. Solomiya, excited to have you on the show here.
Thanks, Brian. Happy to join you here tonight.
Awesome. Well, I know we have a few areas of the logistics and trucking world to cover. You have a unique background where you can see a lot of different angles of it. Would love to start with your story and kind of growing up in a trucking company in some ways, right? And how that has influenced kind of your career and ultimately to WireBee. But could you tell us a little bit about Nika's and kind of how you grew up in the trucking world, what roles you played, and how you learned about the industry?
Yeah, I'd love to. So my parents, they moved to the States in 2000 from Ukraine and started out with, buying one truck. My dad got a CDL and grew from there. Started driving himself, had a couple of drivers under him. This was before ELDs, before really TMSs, anything. So a lot of just opening a map and going. He eventually grew that to, a fleet of 20, 25. By the time that I was done with college, I joined, had a business degree. So my experience was during college, just a little bookkeeping, a little dispatching, a little bit of everything. But after my education, we had a little bit more of an established company where we had divisions, we had a compliance department, we had a dispatch team, people were doing dedicated roles. So it was really, it was nice to be able to build upon that and be part of a company that was able to grow and scale. And so now they're at 45 units with, I think, 60 trailers. We own and operate out of a pretty large warehouse. We partner with a 3PL here, so we're able to offer more to our customers than we had in the past. Consolidated shipments, run specialty freight, bulk kind for vans. So it's been a very cool journey to be a part of and experience trucking from one truck as a kid to where we are now.
I love that, and I think it'll tie into WireBee. We've had conversations in the past around how really understanding the industry is important to anyone who's working as a service provider to carriers or brokers. I'm curious if you recall your first memory or job in the company, if it was sweeping out trailers or if it was bookkeeping. What was your first participation in the company, if you recall that?
As a kid, I remember my dad used to let me drive around in the forklift to practice. So like 13, 14, obviously before I got my license. And at the same time, we were hauling nurseries, so plants and different things like that in our dry vans. And so we would sweep out trailers and I would help with my mother on like weekends or after school. So probably around 14, I would say that was my first unofficial job. But after that, it was like sending out invoices. I remember all of those used to be by mail, right? So you'd have to print them off, mail them all individually. You'd have like stacks of hundreds of them.
Awesome. And through that, this will maybe segue a little bit into when you actually stepped in more into the accounting and finance side of the business later on. But what are some of the lessons that you learned around, how to be successful in this business, right? It's pretty atypical to learn those lessons when you're maybe 12, 13, 14 years old. But curious what some of those lessons are from your past experience.
I think, because this industry is so heavily regulated and a lot of things are kind of forced upon carriers, it's better to adapt to changes faster than later. So I remember when ELDs came out, we jumped on those sooner, just so we had a better understanding of what that would require from us by the time that it was an official regulation. So we kind of pride ourselves on that we're able to take these processes and implement them within our company so that it's then an advantage to us and not a disadvantage.
Awesome. And maybe we can fast forward to, post college, you stepped into a bit more of a leadership role in some ways at the company, right? Taking on pretty meaningful responsibility at the company at that point. How did that role in some of the financial side of the business you were supporting with at that point in time influence, both how you thought about the industry and, ultimately deciding to go and launch your own business as well outside of that?
Yeah. So I learned quickly that the relationship building aspect of, maybe any business, but specifically logistics is incredibly important. And it's not just for your, the customers that you serve, it's for your vendors as well. So because I was vendor side, I, seek out loan opportunities, negotiate fleet deals when we were updating our equipment. So the things of that nature, I think, are just as important to develop and maintain relationships, because if you, have breakdowns and you don't have a good system of places where you could get parts or service done quickly, then you're not able to, get your truck back on the road, and then you're losing money. So I would say that that was my main takeaway, was really building and maintaining relationships.
Awesome. Cool. And as you thought about that, like when you're in that position, I know that you juggle a lot of things in your world. I think since the first time we met, something I was very impressed with. How and why did you start working on multiple things? Was it just a natural muscle for you? Or for you, like, I want to do my own thing outside of it, or I always want to be juggling multiple things? Like, how did that kind of come to be, given that you had a full-time job in the family business, right? You didn't have to go and start a company. It's probably a lot more work than most people like to sign up for in their lives. So yeah, curious, like, what's the inspiration for you around that?
I think it's just my innate curiosity as a human being. I really enjoy figuring out a process, seeing where I could potentially implement something new, better it, train whoever I need to on that process, and then hand it off, and then kind of monitor it from the sidelines. So in that way, I've always been able to kind of take on new projects. So I guess that's the main driver behind it, is curiosity and just willingness and ability to see what else I could accomplish, and what ownership I could, attribute to myself for potential successes and failures. And I think it all is about learning and expanding your knowledge within this field, this whole industry as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of threading the needle between the trucking company, your family's business you grew up in, and WireBee, could you connect the dots for us? When did that come to be? How did those come together? Did you have a specific moment when you said, okay, I think I need to go solve this problem?
So we started WireBee a few years back with my co-founders, Andre and Alex. And to be honest, frank, the company's roots were in building a payment solution. So it was a fintech company that we were building. And even though what we built, it was functioning and well, we realized that it was something that had a lot of competition, wasn't exactly solving anything new and exciting. It was difficult to kind of get out and explain to people what we were building and why they should try it. And I guess a big takeaway from that part of WireBee's life for me is, don't ever build in a vacuum. Always call for people's real issues and talk to customers as soon as possible. And with that in mind, Andre's background, my co-founder, is in telecommunications and voice over AP, and I'd always stayed involved in the family business and logistics. And because of our trucking and brokerage division needing new solutions for how we were, handling our communications, I talked to Andre on and off about the different issues that we faced. And as he got a little more involved and really consulting me and helping me understand where I could better my process, his light bulb moment was right there of, wow, the freight industry doesn't have like a phone system specific to them that includes and integrates with tools that these companies use on a day-to-day basis. And we saw a really interesting like gap within communication that we thought that WireBee could fix. And given my network of broker and trucking friends, the more people we talked to, the more that problem became relevant. And as we started testing and building about a year ago, we, our first launch partner customer told us within a few months that, hey, this is something we cannot live without now. So pretty
Very
cool
cool.
pivot.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know I've spent a lot of time in dispatch rooms and to some extent brokerage floors, and that's kind of where you guys are talking about. Like, these communications challenges are really unique. For folks who may not have seen this side of the industry or they're in smaller companies, could you describe some of the communications challenges of like why a dedicated voice over IP or phone system is so important here?
Yeah. And so actually what we learned is that you don't need a dedicated phone system, but you could use WireBee and just sit on top of it. And then, even if you have the cheapest phone system out there, what we offer will help you with everything else. So you can stay on any phone system, and then use our software to enhance that functionality for you. With that being said, we saw that our first fix is really for freight brokers, and they get a lot of phone calls coming in, especially when they post freight on load boards.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is fragmented. They don't know who's calling them. They don't know why they're calling. They have no visibility and no way of controlling those phone calls. And so, what we started with is a simple screen of the phone number and showing brokers, hey, this number is actually potentially fraudulent. We were showing different spoofing things, which was useful. But as soon as we started to enhance their call flow and mitigating that volume of calls coming in, is when our broker customers told us, this is why we can't live without your product, because we can now see who's calling us. We could now see why they're calling us, what load they're calling about, and we could filter out calls based on all of our connected other devices that we use. So whether it's onboarding tools, WireBee's integrated with those things, and we are able to pull that data and in real time use it to sift up calls that are not pertinent to that broker's needs.
How many calls are we talking here? I know it can vary a lot, but for folks who aren't on a brokerage floor and may be surprised to hear this, like, how many calls are we talking? An hour or a day? Do you have an order of magnitude just to give folks a sense of that?
So if a broker posts a load that's, let's say, admirable to a freight carrier, and it's a load in a desirable area, and there's more trucks than there is freight available, then you're going to get as many as 30, 40 phone calls for one person load. With our system, we cut that in half. So half of those calls, we actually pick up all the phone calls for our broker customers, and we'll probably hang up on half of them because those calls are not passing their criteria. So there's no reason for the broker to spend that, 10, 20 seconds to pick up the call, find out who the carrier is, and then tell them we actually can't work with you. You're in our do not use list. You just simply don't meet our criteria, or you're calling us about a load that we just covered. So we sift up a lot of those, and then we allow our brokers to pick who to talk to first. So we show them who's in their network. We show them how long the carrier's been around, a lot of other information that helps them decide who to talk to first and how to best book a appointment.
Very cool. How does this compare to other systems on the market? You know, if I go buy a phone system, I might think this problem is solved. For example, I have a system, I have visibility to it, we can transfer calls. What's so unique about WireBee and its approach, both in terms of in addition to a phone system and what else is available out there to brokers and other stakeholders?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of two ways, right? If you look at phone systems, which we're not replacing phone systems, we're enhancing them. So in that way, we're not adding to that cost of a phone system. We're really enhancing the functionality and allowing you to be more efficient with your time, because the type of data that we provide is freight specific, and phone systems simply they don't solve for these issues.
Yeah.
A phone system like RingCentral is not going to integrate with your, onboarding tools like My Carrier Portal or Highway or MIS, which WireBee does for our broker customers, or with your TMS for that matter, and so on and so forth. And then the other fix that, is coming out and has been for the last year or two is, well, you get these spikes in phone calls. Why don't you just fix it with AI and have AI pick up your calls, and you don't have to use your human resources to talk to carriers anymore, or, it's all for other types of communications. The way that we differ from that is we're not against AI, and we think that you should use it when appropriate, but we think that AI should be used in tandem with the human resources that you have on hand. So our goal is to really enhance in this specific example, the carrier sales reps with the data that we provide to them. We'll use AI or IVR systems to do the basic part of the conversation, the load collection information, things like that. And then we'll send the call back to a human so that they could do the meaty part of the call, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's how we really differentiate, is that we allow our brokers to choose how much of the conversation is done through us and how much of the conversation is done with their people. Whereas I would say that AI-driven communication is really just a replacement of human conversation. And I don't know if that's where our customers are yet.
So I love this topic of AI. When we've talked about this at length of how AI ties to meeting people where they're at in their workflows. And so I'm really curious how your background and lived experiences influences how you think about that. Because what you're not talking about is a full-blown AI replacing your phone system or replacing reps, right? You're talking about like a process augmentation. So I'm curious how any specific experiences you have that inform that somewhat unique view of how AI should plug in to phone systems for folks in the trucking world.
Yeah. I mean, as we build out functionality, we're constantly talking to the trucking side, right? We're talking to carriers and we're talking to their dispatchers, and we want to know what the conversation sounds like for them. We're not trying to make them not want to talk to brokers as well. So I think you have to understand both parties of who are in the conversation, and you have to understand that brokers are, even though a carrier is not their customer, it's their vendor, they need to meet their carriers where they're at, because it's such an important relationship for them to be able to serve their shippers best. And you're not going to use AI to talk to your shipper. Not for all your conversations. You're probably going to lose a shipper. So I think it's the same kind of mentality. You're not going to talk to your most valuable carriers and use AI to handle all the conversations for you, because that relationship building aspect of the carrier broker relationship will go away. So the best way is to find a place where you use it to your advantage, but not to your vendor and customer disadvantage.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So leverage it, but don't have it replace you at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So where are you guys going with this? I guess you're focused on brokers mostly today, if I have that correctly. Do you have any focus beyond that? Like what does the growth of WireBee look like? Who are you servicing? What's the grand vision, so to speak, here?
So right now we have, we're handling inbound calls. Our next goal is within WireBee to be able to have our customers use WireBee to place outbound calls.
Mm.
So to call from our system. And beyond that, we would really like to become the communication center of our customers. So this is where all of your communication source of truth will live. So it's email, it's text messages, it's phone calls. So that's where we're headed as far as brokers and I think carriers are concerned, because this is such a interesting ecosystem where you're constantly communicating back and forth with the same parties. And we think a lot of these issues, and we believe a lot of these issues based on the conversations that we've had, could also be solved by WireBee for carrier customers as well.
Awesome. Cool. And how does that ecosystem come together? You said you're integrated with some tools today. I know that a lot of folks have different systems, whether it's a TMS or a CRM, they have the carrier onboarding tools. Is WireBee connecting to a primary system and everything flowing from there, or connecting with multiple systems at the same time? Like, how do you think about partnering? Because communications requires a lot of data flow from different places. So how does that side of it fit together?
So we partner with companies based on our current customers' use and needs, right? Obviously, we're partnered with onboarding tools. We're partnering with TMSs, and that kind of goes in order of what TMSs our customers are using and how they would like to utilize that load level data within WireBee and their communications. So, if they want us to screen out phone calls based on loads that they've already been covered, or if they want us to collect bid information for their loads and push it back into their TMS, then that's the kind of integration that we would be doing.
Very cool. And for how that works, is this really an implementation for you all, or are you guys thinking about this as a standard plugin that fits in various tools? How does that kind of fit together of how over time where WireBee goes?
I think over time, we would like to integrate and pull things into our system so that, you live within WireBee to handle your communication on a load by load basis.
Cool. Awesome. I love asking this about like surprises. I talk to folks about the biggest challenge or the most difficult load they've ever had. We talked about pickles on a previous podcast episode. So I guess whether it's WireBee or Nika's, biggest surprise or unexpected aspect of your experience in the trucking world. I'm curious if you have any one or two stories that stand out there.
Unexpected aspects of the trucking world. I don't know. I've been told a lot, like by my dispatch team, that it's nice that you're a girl because they talk a lot nicer to you. But Lord, my dispatch team gets all sorts of communication, and I think it's just part of the territory with this industry. We've had crazy things come up, honestly. Like, because we have a system in place, we'll catch like double brokering or fraud. And I mean this for the trucking company that my family runs. We've been unfortunately stuck with like shipments of just drinks that we've had to then donate to food bank because we would get some kind of double brokering scheme. And when we finally contacted the rightful owner, they would say, okay, we'll just keep the shipment because we have to figure out the rest. I don't know if it's surprising, but I'm surprised how many companies don't catch these types of things because they don't have don't ask the right questions and they don't have processes in place. But maybe while using WireBee to screen out their potentially spoof calls, at least some brokers would save themselves on that kind of fraudulent activity.
Yeah, it's one brick at a time in some ways, right? There's no silver bullet, but having the right tools can really protect you from those challenges.
It's right tools and also right training. Platforms are only part of the equation. Like really experience, learning from a good mentor in the system that you're in. It's a whole lot of things, I think, but good tools and good people behind those tools are also quite important.
What does that training look like, and whether it's in your family business or in the brokerages that you partner with? Like what does great training look like on those teams? Do you have any lessons or advice for folks who are trying to get the right people in the seat, so to speak?
Ask as many questions as you could possibly think of. No question is dumb. And just go out there and have those conversations that you're afraid to have, because the first few times you're probably going to mess up. But the more that you practice and the more questions that you ask, the better you'll become. There's a lot to learn, but with time, it all makes sense.
Yeah. As we're kind of wrapping up here, I got one question about advice. What do you wish more people really understood about carriers, freight brokers, the team members that are operating within them? Again, you've seen a lot of different sides of this. So what do you wish people understood more there?
I wish sometimes people would remember that there's, like a real person behind the company that you're potentially upset with, that even though the tools that are now in Freight are phenomenal, I think sometimes we just will blindly use them without doing due diligence and like a real understanding of, okay, well, why did this happen? And even if, I am now blacklisting this company, is there recourse for them? How do they communicate going forward? I think I wish people would remember that there's humanity within this industry, and it's okay to give people another shot. And, not always is it like a double broker. Sometimes it's just miscommunication. And I wish more probably brokers would remember that now, because, when the pie churns and there's less equipment than there are shipments, then they'll remember that. But you should probably remember that throughout the ecosystem of where freight is. So yeah, I think that's my thing. Just being friendlier to each other and giving people space to, to make mistakes, but also to move on and to prove themselves to be better. Because I've seen time and time again, small carriers, 2-5 trucks, get one right up because someone was angry and then their livelihood's ruined. And I don't think that's fair. I think there's better ways of approaching that. And these guys with a few trucks, they don't know where to go and how to start. So, yeah.
I like that. I think it's apt as well, having that perspective. So someone who's building an AI-powered communications tool and platform, really focusing on and trying to think about the humanity behind those tools, right? Because that is a balance I think it can get missed often. Well, our last question, we are on Trucking Tomorrow. So as you think towards the next year, we're at end of 2025 or 24 right now. What are your top priorities, both on the trucking side, but I know you still have some involvement on that side of the house, and then on WireBee as well? What are you looking forward most to next year in 2025?
Trucking side, I think just really, hammering out our RFPs, making sure that we're servicing our customers, have a good understanding of what our shipper and broker customer needs are on lane specific agendas. And I think we're going to be able to achieve that. I think where we're headed is in 25 is a good place. We've already kind of established our loads for the next few months, so I'm happy where we stand. As far as WireBee is concerned, I'm very excited to kind of get out there. I mean, we were a year ago just starting out building this product, and just in September is when we got our first paying customers. So it's definitely been stealth mode and working with our initial customers this year to understand and better build our product. And now that we know that we have something good and something that's useful and helping our customers' efficiency go from, spending 20 minutes on a load to 5 minutes on a load, I'm excited to get out there, go to conferences, talk to people, talk to them about WireBee and how, we can potentially help them. So just excited to get out there, meet more people in the industry and make my connections.
Awesome. Well, here's to 2025 and getting out there. Solomiya, thank you so much for joining the show. Great conversation as always. Thanks again.
Thank you, Brian. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Trucking Tomorrow. The show notes include links to any resources mentioned in today's show. And if you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.
Truck base, you're always tough.